people not to come back, but please do if you want to.
I'm happy to leave it at that for now, but I will reserve the right to come back on the final paragraph of my question if I don't get a satisfactory answer at a later stage this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Grimble. That's great. The second question, I'm combining two questions. Is Carolyn Posgate from Coton Parish Council points out the lack of analysis in your report of the potential effects of East West Rail on the business case, the already developed business case for C2C. On paragraph 6.22, page 67 of the report, you say it's unlikely that East West Rail will have an impact on the core business case for C2C. And she questions, how can that be the case when, if you're working at the biomedical park and you have a choice of a 5-minute train every 15 minutes to get down there, or getting onto a C2C bus somewhere into the centre of Cambridge, changing and going out again. Clearly, that's going to mean people are going to go by rail, not by bus, and surely that will have had an impact on your business case. Now, the other one I'd like to combine with this is questions by Terry Spencer and Alistair Burford, residents of Coton, who ask equally about the COVID response, how your business case can still stand without re-evaluation, given the likely changes resulting from COVID. You state on page 57, paragraph 1.13, that the case for schemes like C2C will be stronger as a result of COVID-19. And many people who submitted questions and have contacted us otherwise can't quite understand how that is the case. So if you could answer, do you not think that East West Rail has affected your business case? How do you expect that COVID strengthens your business case?
Thank you, Steve. So I'll start, and Joe might jump in on some of this. So in terms of East West Rail, we're obliged to follow the Department for Transport's process, and you know this because I keep telling you. And that means that in terms of developing the business case, we assess committed schemes, and that's what we need to demonstrate to ourselves, to yourselves as residents, and to key organisations like the Department for Transport. East West Rail is not yet a committed scheme. The plan for that scheme is to support delivery of 1 million additional homes in the Oxford-Cambridge arc over and above the existing homes that are in the local plan. And indeed the emerging local plan as we understand it at the moment. And so actually we're not in a position to assess East West Rail because it is not a sufficiently advanced scheme. When East West Rail comes along, if it does indeed come along, it's going to come along with significantly additional levels of growth in our area, not just the Oxford end, but also at the Cambridge end, which will mean there will be more people that will be wanting to go, yes, to the biomedical campus, but also to West Cambridge, to the western northern part of the city, and they'll want to require a variety of options to do that in the early to mid 2030s, if that's the sort of time scale that they're looking at. In terms of the question around the impact of COVID on public transport, well, unfortunately, we've seen a marked impact on public transport from COVID, and actually in terms of monitoring the recovery rates across all of the modes, actually public transport has seemingly impacted more. So that means that people are traveling less and feel less safe currently using public transport. The problems that we face going forward, supporting the economic growth in the local plan and beyond, the issues of air quality, carbon and congestion aren't going to go away. And so the reality is that the case for creating reliable and appealing public transport, cycling and walking options is going to be even stronger to make the case to encourage people to use other means other than the private car. We are expecting revised business case guidance from the Department for Transport early in the new year. And perhaps on the back of that, we're also expecting an update from the Treasury Green Book guidance that supports schemes with strategically strong business cases, such as the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme.
Okay. Well, can you still explain the point you raised? The case for schemes like C2C will be stronger as a result of COVID-19. So what is it that's happened in the last 12 months that makes you think more people will want to travel on the C2C busway than you'd thought a year ago?
Well, the requirement for promoting public and active travel is going to continue going forward under any scenario, and nobody knows exactly, what travel patterns will look like as a result of this. But we know in our area that there is significant growth already projected on our existing congested networks, that air quality and carbon will remain a challenge. And to really respond to those, then we will need to ensure that we deliver attractive, reliable public transport, walking and cycling. And so what that means is, and it's a general point regarding the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme, it doesn't just apply to this alignment, it applies to any alignment. The general point is that we will be required to promote those public transport alternatives. We expect the business case guidance from Department for Transport to reflect that, and then the Treasury Green Book. Okay,
I'm sorry, I still don't quite see that you've answered the question, which is justifying the case for schemes like C2C will be stronger as a result of COVID. How does COVID make your business case stronger?
Well, maybe if Joe has a go.
So the impact we're seeing of COVID is twofold. We're seeing fewer people traveling to work, and we're seeing people who are wary of using public transport because of the associated health risks. And we should be very clear, none of us really know quite what the outcome is. I mean, today was the first day of a vaccine. We hope that's the start of the road back to normality, whatever that is. However, over the last 20 years, as the transport profession, we've been trying to coax people out of their cars onto public transport. And it's probably realistic to say that an impact of COVID has been to set that process back. And as such, in order to deal with issues around congestion, around air quality in our cities, it will be even more of a challenge to get people back onto public transport. And the case, as in the argument for investment in public transport, is even more pressing now as we need to effectively claw back to the position we were in even before COVID. So I think the word case has maybe been taken into saying patronage of the scheme as distinct from the strategic case for the need for intervention, which is what we're really referring to.
Okay, Joe, so if I was to summarize, what you'd be saying is that people are going to want to ride on buses more, and policymakers are going to want to encourage people to do that because of the lessons of COVID.
No, I don't. No. What I'm saying, Steve, is effectively we recognise it's going to be even harder in the future to get people back out of their cars again because because of there's been less traffic and public health concerns, and therefore it's going to take further intervention to try and coax people back out of their cars as we've been doing in previous years. And therefore there's a stronger requirement, if we want to tackle things like congestion and air quality, to put more effort into trying to encourage people away from their cars.
I'm still not sure quite that I get the logic, but let's move to the next question.
No, can I think
okay, please.
We've got both Gabriel and Marcus who want to come in on that, I can see.
Yeah, I just wanted to, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on that point, because I mean, there's fundamentally it doesn't make sense. It's illogical. So what we've seen in the pandemic is people not wanting to go on public transport for health reasons, and separately, people not going to work so much, people working from home. Out of those two things, people not wanting to go on public transport for health reasons is something which I think we can all imagine will resolve in time. Once the pandemic is finished, let's say move forward 2 years, 3 years, it'll be a bit of a memory. People will not then feel that they can't go on a bus or go to the shops or anything. That bit will go away. What will not go away is a significantly increased number of people working at home. I think everybody accepts that. I mean, that's just now mainstream thinking, that there has been a significant shift towards people being prepared to and being technologically enabled to work from home. So I think there is a general sense that there will be some reduction. We don't know if it's 5% or 20% or whatever. There will be some sort of a reduction. What that means is that the roads will flow a bit more freely and public transport schemes will be able to run more easily on existing roads. So the argument that you have to build separate freestanding or segregated infrastructure for public transport just doesn't hold up. What you need to do is improve public transport, but that doesn't now, because of increased people working from home. That no longer absolutely requires that those modes are segregated. Your argument was it has to be segregated to avoid congested roads. If roads are less congested, that goes away. And you haven't answered that point at all. You've made an assumption about, on a completely spurious point, about whether or not people will feel scared about getting on a bus in a few years' time, which is the
Jan, Gabriel, and then we'll.
That's the thing. If you could just address that point, why do you need segregated infrastructure in the post-COVID setting in, say, 5 years' time?
Joe, would you like to respond to that? We've got two other people wanting to come in on this.
So you're absolutely right that nobody knows quite what the traffic level will be in a post-COVID world. However, we're already seeing strong signs of traffic building up. And in a city like Cambridge, with a strong dependency on education and health, as well as the retail sector, many people in reality will revert to a workplace. Some people in the sort of knowledge economy will not, but many other people inevitably will. As we work towards a full business case, we will inevitably need to revisit the business case, and by that stage there will be more evidence, and you may well be proved right, and that's something we will have to accept if that is the case. On the other hand, we know that there's a huge suppressed demand in Cambridge because of the level of congestion that's there. And it is quite likely that without intervention, people who might have accepted the need not to drive their car, because there is any reduction in traffic, will choose to drive. And you'll have heard the phrase roads generate traffic, that if you create road capacity, it tends to fill up. But in Cambridge, we know there's a huge amount of suppressed demand. And I think it's highly likely that roads will remain congested because there is a lot of pent-up demand already there, let alone what happens when you put another 6,000 houses onto the corridor.
Okay, I've got three more people. I've got Mark Abbott first of all, then James, and then Marcus. Mark, would you like to come in? Mark Abbott, you're on mute.
Apologies. Actually, Gabriel raised the points I wanted to make on that. So that's I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. James, you're on mute too, if you'd like to come in.
Steve, yeah, I think you'll mention the comment I just made in the chat there, which is just to say that an alternative solution is demand management, which obviously you are looking at in terms of the city access. And the alternative here is that we have a much better bus service and fewer cars. And what the pandemic has shown us is that very feasible. You have fewer cars, the buses run on time, they're reliable and fast. You don't need a busway.
Okay, so that's a similar point, overlapping point. And Marcus.
Yeah, with apologies to the officers, forgive me if I'm slightly skeptical, because the very first route that was favored by GCP over 5 years ago is exactly the route that we ended up with. But my question that I submitted yesterday at 6 p.m. was not included in the papers, which, yes, you have some discretion to limit public participation, but I found your discretion exercise quite questionable if it's just so shortly after the deadline. I'd like to ask whether you really think your analysis on East-West Rail is adequate. Because on the one hand, you say East-West Rail would offer an attractive mode of travel from sea to sea to the city center, right? I'm not sure whether you mean sea to sea Cambourne or Cambridge City or whatever, but let's say you meant Cambourne to the city center. For the last 5 years, you've told us that it needs to land at Grange Road because only Grange Road makes it attractive for a commercial provider of buses. Now, can you explain to me how a commercial provider of buses will run buses in parallel to a much more reliable train track that you say is an attractive alternative? And in addition, you then say, it has no impact on the business case because, it's likely that it will take a couple of years until East-West Rail will be realized. I agree with that assessment, but we're not building a busway or bus road for the next 2 years or next 5 years. We're building it for the next 30 years. So how can it be that it has no impact on your business case?
Okay, Marcus, let's
doesn't
give
make
Peter.
any sense.
Thanks very much. Sorry to cut across you there. Peter, would you like to come back there, or?
Yeah, Steve. So I think I touched on that earlier on in the sort of the first question that you posed. We follow the requirements that we're obliged to. So we've considered that scheme, and we will continue to consider the scheme as we go through our business case development, because we're far from the end of the business case, let alone getting anywhere near constructing this. But the requirement is that East West Rail is not yet a committed scheme. And so Department for Transport are really quite clear on how we deal with that. We've recognised that in our considerations. We absolutely understand, and we have a question elsewhere about the linkages and the integration. Absolutely right, because particularly if we're going to get the tail end of 1 million homes in our geography as a result of East West Rail, then we need to be able to cater for that, and that will require a number of bits of infrastructure and additional services, and probably a great deal more as well.
Okay, well, related, you kind of made the point there, you referred to the question and related to Marcus's question. Councillor Ruth Betson from Cambourne, has the GCP considered an integrated solution for all transport services arriving to the north of Cambourne along the A428 corridor? So that would be the metro, buses, and train. A travel hub there would deliver fast, reliable and affordable transport to 30,000 people living in West Cambourne, Bourne Airfield and current Cambourne. If you haven't done this, why not? Because although we take your point, surely the layout should take account of likely future layouts.
So, I mean, Ruth makes an important point, and we've looked at integration both north and south of Cambourne, depending upon which option the East West Rail come forward with. I mean, clearly we're in their hands in terms of the station location, and we understand we'll hear a bit more about that earlier in the new year. But certainly that work is, we've gone through that work.
Okay. Ruth, was that okay for you? Do you want to come back in, Ruth, or you're on mute?
Yes,
okay.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the mouse and then the mute button. Thank you very much for that. You say you've considered it, but can you give us more detail? When can we get that detail? When can we look at it and assess what you've been doing on that, please?
Well, we're very much waiting for East West Rail to make their announcement in terms of, firstly, their consultation earlier in the new year, and then an announcement we expect later next year in terms of what the location is. Our scheme at the moment is deliberately flexible at that end to go north or south. So we're absolutely being led by East West Rail, working very closely with colleagues at the combined authority to make sure that whatever decision East West Rail comes up with, we have the flexibility to make sure that the point you've raised about integration actually happens. So
can I take from that as soon as East West Rail announces, you can tell us the detail of the either north or south scheme?
Well, we can come forward with that information, but clearly it needs to follow where the station location is.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Okay, fine. I'd like now, facilitator's privilege, to ask my own question, but modified slightly for what you told us earlier, Peter. We, the talking about on behalf of the Coalition of Parish Councils, welcome the decision of the GCP board to appoint an internal auditor, an independent auditor. This is an opportunity for the board to build the trust of the local community in the whole C2C process. But for trust to be built in this way, we've got to be absolutely convinced that the auditor is demonstrably independent. And for this to be achieved, we think, and I must say, there's history here. There's history both with your previous independent consultants in the shape of Mark MacDonald and Atkins before that in both cases, they did not build the confidence of the community that they were independent. They appeared rather to be, not prepared to listen to us, but only be instructed by you. We have to be sure that this new auditor, this independent auditor, is not under the control of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Yeah, and we would suggest the best way of doing that is to involve the LLF on a steering committee to oversee the work of the auditor, and to be sure the appointment of the auditor as well involves the local community in that process. Otherwise, you won't build that trust. And I think you also have a number of issues raising from that. What do you have any comments on that?
Well, I suppose we've never appointed an independent auditor previously, Steve.
Well,
I think
who does appoint it? Will it be you?
In our opening comments, mentioned Arup. Clearly, that wasn't an appointment made by Greater Cambridge Partnership. That was the combined authority, and therefore the report was to them and not us. In terms of this process, I think it's important that as scheme promoter, the GCP board lead with commissioning the audit process. What's outlined and what I outlined earlier on, and again we'll put our slides up tomorrow along with answers to your questions, is saying that we will appoint an independent person who will then be responsible for developing the brief and then overseeing the commissioning of an independent transport expert to carry out the review. I think that's the appropriate way of taking it forward. You clearly may have a different view, and I'm sure in your deliberations later on this evening, that might be something that you want to talk through with your colleagues.
So you think that if an independent auditor appointed by the GCP board is a sufficient way of, how will you assure the independence of that person? They'll be paid by you, they will report to you. How do we ensure their independence?
Well, I think what they're doing, we will be asking for one person to outline a process, to outline the evidence base, the assumptions and the constraints, and make that absolutely clear, to give opportunity to stakeholders such as yourselves and others in the area to have representation on that. With this, they then appoint an entirely separate technical expert to review this in accordance with the Department for Transport processes, and then that is all publicly available on the website. The final report will be considered in public. It will be publicly available. I'm sure there will be a liaison forum where you will go through this. So I think the opportunity for independence will absolutely be assured through that process.
How do you select the person? How do you advertise for this person? Or is it going to be somebody you know already?
Well, I'm sure we're still working on that. I mean, fortunately, I'm dealing with transport, and so quite rightly, there will be others taking the lead on that, and we'll bring those details forward as soon as we've got them. At the moment, the recommendation to the board is to say, is this something you want to do or not? And that will be something they will need to consider on Thursday.
Okay, fine. We will be discussing this in the next part of the meeting, so we'll leave it till then, and Helen will bring it to the meeting.
Grenville wants to come on this, actually, don't you, Grenville?
Steve,
please do, Grenville. Sorry, thank you.
Can I just flush out a bit of this trust element, please, because I think this is a major point for us. And one of the things that I would like to hear from Peter tonight is a straightforward answer to the following question, and that is: will you take the opportunity this evening to assure residents that their best interests will be at the heart both of the audit and of the environmental impact assessment in due course, should it proceed? Straightforward question, Peter, please.
I mean, I think, as I've said, Grenville, that I won't be directly commissioning or anything in terms of the audit, but clearly the intention, both in terms of the audit and then certainly when it comes, if it comes to in terms of the environmental impact assessment, is absolutely to be in the best interests of all residents, businesses, communities within our area. But as you know, and I know, that people have different views and different considerations that we weigh up. I mean, I think the point Steve was making earlier on about that transparency is important, which is why all of this information will be publicly available. Whilst it will be, if the board agree it on Thursday, then this will then come back to the board. But we are trying to operate in the best interest of everybody in this area, with the various competing demands that we have placed upon us in terms of the growth agenda, congestion, air quality, and the like.
Okay. Right, fine. Well, then let's proceed to the next question we identified, which is Councillor Josh Matthews from Newham. He asked a question which you alluded to and did talk about a bit about the environmental impact assessment. Can we just be clear of the timing and the relationship between the EIA and the independent auditor and their work? Because until the independent auditor has done its work and said, hey, we like the existing scheme, or if they do say that, until that stage, any work on the EIA would waste public money, is the view. You can't do it. You can't be sure that it's a good investment until you know that you've got the backing of the independent auditor. So
in terms of the process, and hopefully I was trying to answer Josh's question in the presentation.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
The process will be that only until after the audit reports will the public consultation on the EIA be undertaken. But I would reference Grenville's first question in terms of the sort of the requirement for more information to be developed, and I think everyone would be sensitive to that. And what I've alluded to earlier on is the project team was stood down a number of months ago. We need to get them up and running, regardless of what the audit comes up with. Because if it says it likes it, you go down one track, and if it doesn't, you've got to look at something else. So there's a requirement for a body of work to be undertaken, and so we recognise that it will take a while for them to get up to speed, and there's various design work that could help with taking the EIA forward, but only if and only after the audit reports and if it finds in its favour.
Great. Okay, Josh, are you happy with that? There's an answer.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think that was reasonably clear.
Thanks. And Helen's going to ask the next question, which is from James Littlewood, the CEO of Cambridge PPF. It's about the Girton Northern alignment. Helen, you're not reading your WhatsApp messages.
I've got too much to do. I'm trying to write down what's being said here. Okay, James's question. We note in the GCP board papers that the Mayor's efforts to develop a northern route for the C2C scheme seem to have been blocked. An alignment via a park and ride at Girton interchange would seem to have a number of benefits, including passengers from the North and Midlands, A14, M11, passengers from Eddington and Girton, shorter shuttle route to park and ride for operators, in brackets for inner cam, and it maintains new infrastructure within existing infrastructure corridor. Do officers agree?
I mean, we've looked at routes to the north, and we've looked in particular at Girton following discussions with the liaison forum previously. And in terms of supporting development along the A428 corridor, it's difficult. It's difficult because it's a much longer journey, it's much more expensive, and it relies on improvements to the Girton interchange. And just on that point, GCP petitioned the Highways England to look at bringing forward improvements to the interchange. I'm not sure how many others did. We did. We provided them with information on the benefits of doing that. And Highways England have decided that for the foreseeable future, they're not going to do that. So in terms of the context of trying to manage the development pressures along the A428 corridor, Girton is not the location in terms of all of the evidence that we've gone through that delivers that.
Okay. James or Helen, would you like to come back on that?
If I could just come back on that. Peter, could you just answer the question, please?
Would you want to say it again, James, to make it clear?
Yeah, just bear with me a second. So yeah, so the question is, do you agree that having an interchange in that location would provide some benefits? And those benefits would be, it would passengers coming from the North and the Midlands, passengers from Eddington and Girton, shorter shuttle route for an inner cam, and it would maintain new infrastructure within the existing corridor.
So answer straight like that, James. Park and ride at Girton offers some benefits, but the benefits are for a different reason than we're talking about in terms of development and managing development along the A428. And there would be a different set of considerations, a different technical process required to do that. There are still some imponderables around the interchange itself. And getting across that, but in a different context with a different geography that we're looking at, yes, it does. But that's not the exam question we're looking at here.
Okay,
but in your report, or in your technical review, you didn't look at any benefits of that nature. So I mean, as you've summarised, you just came to the conclusion it was longer, and we would have to wait for upgrades to the Girton interchange, which is not necessarily so. But you know, in my 5 years chairing this committee, I think that actually was a really disingenuous piece of work, because and we had real material disagreements with you about the scope of that report, many of the assumptions and constraints, and many unsupported statements. And I think and I think these things, particularly the benefits of the scheme, ought to have at least been assessed, and a busway drawn in, which, you know, wasn't drawn in either.
So you won't be surprised that I disagree with you on that point. I think importantly, in terms of James's question, James is saying passengers coming from the North and the Midlands. Yeah, that is in a different exam question than supporting sustainable development along the A428 corridor west of Cambridge. So does a park and ride or a public transport intervention at that point, focusing on the funneling people coming in from the North and the Midlands offer value? Yes, it does. It will still need to be subject to a whole series of appraisals and everything else. But on at first glance, it does. Does a park and ride at that location service the requirements of sustainable development and sustainable movements coming in from Cambourne? Then our assessment clearly says it doesn't.
Okay, this sounds like it might be one for the independent auditor to have a close look at. Shall we move on? Is that okay, Helen and James?
Yes, fine with me.
Okay. Helen, you're muted.
I just think at the point when the goalpost changed in October or November 2018, and C2C was subsumed into CAM, then at that point we ought to have been looking at how to make the CAM and the transport west of Cambridge as integrated as possible, with the highest potential for modal shift and the best BCR possible. So it's always been surprising to the LLF ever since that particular option has never been meaningfully developed.
Yeah. Okay, I'd just like to add that Fiona Norton, question 13, the Vice Chair of Madingley Parish Council, raises a question that in fact this scheme is not desirable for a whole variety of environmental reasons, and it was discounted in 2016. So she's going back in time. From a Madingley perspective, maybe this isn't a great scheme, but you can take that question as well when you reply in writing. Two other questions to combine.
I think we should clarify that. I think that was the not the Girton option, but the scheme that's immediately north of the cemetery. We need that.
It was, yeah. It's not exactly. Thanks for that, Helen. You're quite right. Yeah, yep. So okay, then combining two more questions, which I think may be our last ones, are from Chris Pratton, Save the West Fields, and Ellen Kemelitsky, who talks, both of them, about limitations of your analysis of a business case. Ellen says, how do you justify a business case for a route that does not reach its destination in the city centre? She likes it to building a bridge halfway across the river and doing a business case for that. And Chris, in a related way, says that you look in great detail and sing about the benefits of the time savings on inbound traffic, but you don't look at outbound traffic. And he wonders whether you could put the journey times, particularly in the evening, into your table, page 127, table 4. You don't look in a measured way at inbound and outbound at peaks of the day. You look only at inbound in the morning. So do you have any response to those two criticisms?
Well, I mean, just checking the second one first, the major problem is in the morning. Although I have to say that increasingly, certainly in a sort of a pre-COVID environment, there was a problem. There was a burgeoning problem of the evening. But the problem in terms of access is still, or is pronounced in the morning, and that's what that assessment is due to cover and seeks to outline. So it's fairly clear that I think the reasons why we're doing that. The question around Grange Road is one that we've had a number of times over over certainly in my relatively short time here, and I'm sure beyond. In terms of the construction ends as close to the city centre as we can reasonably take it, without having to bulldoze down properties and sort of important sites within the city. The route themselves, the services themselves, will continue. They'll access the segregated parts where they can and where they exist, and then where they don't exist, the routes will then continue into Drummond Street, down into the biomedical campus and beyond. And then the point that I think Helen was making earlier on in 2018 with the sort of the CAM solution on coming on board, and the proposal really then coming forward around portals at various sites around the city where it would drop into a tunnel, so that our segregated solution would then work hand in glove with proposals coming from the combined authority. So at that point, it would drop into a tunnel and it would go seamlessly under the city environment. So that's a point that we've discussed repeatedly over the period in terms of what is construction, what services. And the services clearly use the construction bit, but then also use existing roads. But ultimately, when the proposal comes forward from the combined authority on the tunnel sections, then it will slip seamlessly into tunnels.
Yeah, Chris would like to come back in on that, but just before he does, Councillor Bhattacharya from Cambourne, I'll come to you next, and if you'd like to put your question yourself and make it a little bit briefer than your written question, thanks, that'd be great. Okay, over to you, Chris.
Yeah, I think the point we were really making is that in your justification to the board for accepting the scheme, you were presenting only numbers for inbound buses in the evening, where clearly you're justifying this by taking people out of Cambridge in the evening. Or are you really seeking to only justify a single route, a one-directional route? Because there have been a number of times when people have talked about various possibilities on Madingley Road and so on that were optimal in one direction, but then you say, oh, this has to be a two-way route. So you can't have it both ways. Either you're justifying this as a two-way route that's good for taking people into Cambridge in the morning and out of Cambridge in the evening, or you're not, one way or the other. And if you're justifying a two-way route, then you need to look at how the buses get out in the evening, and you need to justify that and produce timings and so on. That's the point.
The modelling for the business case looks at both directions. It looks at delays in both directions in all peak hours. We've presented a reasonably succinct report to present to the board, which picks out of the large amount of data that we've looked at, what we think are the items that are helpful to the board.
You're being very
hang on, Chris.
Well, I'm sorry.
Chris, hang on. Go finish. Go finish what you wanted to say, and then Chris can come back.
So, in terms of enabling the board to make decisions, as Peter said, the morning peak hour is where the biggest problems are. That illustrates what the problem is. There is a growing level of congestion in the evening peak hour, but in terms of presenting something to enable people to understand what's going on, that's the bit that, if you like, is more interesting. The business case, so the analysis overall, looks at all movements in and out of the city.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Well, I don't accept that. I think I would argue the board paper was deliberately misleading. Unless you read it very, very carefully, it looks like there's an improvement to bus times when you look at the evening peak hour. So I would argue that's deliberately misleading.
Fine, yeah.
Well, there's no easy timings you can see that says anything about how the buses get out of Cambridge.
Great. And final question then. Thank you very much, Chris and Joe. Final question from Councillor Bhattacharya from Cambourne. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So do you want me to
well, don't read the whole question out, but if you could just summarize.
Yeah. So it is very simple. Very simple. Thank you. Thank you for everything. I was listening carefully, but I still believe that we are still underutilizing the resources we are having to get an immediate, faster solution without affecting the local communities along the route. So this is my thing. The last time also I just spoke about a better revised bus system. So the bus system was actually blamed. Even the current revised bus system was also blamed as a slow. It doesn't go to the workplace at the right time. Having as a councillor in this district, we have 104 villages, 2 towns, like economic hub like Cambridge. Can we really claim that? Can we reach from one point to another point at any time, even for last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? This is a very basic thing, and still not providing the first level of efficiency level. We are always jumping over the betterment, thinking over thinking over the the high-ending solution, when the last time I told that we do have the roads, we are still not utilizing the resource we are having.
Yeah, so the point you're making very powerfully in your question was that we could do a lot more by just improving existing bus services on existing roads. We could have direct bus services, from Cambourne
point to point,
Cambourne to where people work, which wouldn't require a busway. You could put them onto the motorways to go around to Cambridge South. You could put them, there would be ways to do things. That's essentially your point. So
yeah, you are very welcome to do a lot of better things when you are actually deliver the basic first level of efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, this is a point that, looking back, Peter, I go back further than you on this. I think I've got old and very grey on the C2C. From the very beginning, this has been a point saying, whatever we do, can't we do something now, City Deal in those days, to improve bus services from Cambourne? If it's not currently commercially viable, can we subsidize them slightly? Are there things we can do to get people from Cambourne onto buses going where they want to go? And maybe in the future, you may need a C2C, but in the short term, we've already missed 5 years when we could have been doing things to improve buses. And that's, I think, Councillor Bhattacharya's point.
Exactly.
And I think, James referenced the city access paper earlier in the meeting. So in other parts of our program, we are looking at how we enhance bus services generally. The combined authorities put on additional bus services with Stagecoach in the area. Unfortunately, all the evidence is telling us that because of the planned growth along this corridor, something more pronounced is required, because otherwise people are simply going to get in their cars and the journey down Madingley Hill or increasingly through the villages and the rat runs is only going to get worse over the period of time. So that's why we're looking at proposals such as Cambourne to Cambridge, and indeed out in Waterbeach, coming in from the east, and then Cambridge Southeast scheme as well.
Great, well, thank you very much. I'll just say, any immediate show of hands, anybody want to make a final point? Helen, and then I'll close it. Helen, you're muted.
Just on
Most
that
common phrase of COVID
about Madingley Hill, what difference do you think the interventions that Highways England are due to make in 2025 to Junction 13 going to make? Because that is in their programme, isn't it?
Okay, final quick question that you didn't know about before.
Yeah, no, they've announced that. I'm not sure it's 2025. I think it's the indication is it starts from then. But I haven't had any details. We've chased them in terms of our understanding of what that is. And again, as soon as we can understand it, then we can start to understand the implications, not just on this scheme, but other schemes around the city. So we're happy to share that when we get it from them.
Great, thank you, Peter. So thank you very much, Peter and Joe and your colleagues, for coming tonight, answering all these questions. I think we'll now go into the LLF session, and I'm sure we'll have another occasion to meet like this again.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, cheers, bye. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Joe. So Helen, would you like to kick us off on this next session? And I'll
very well done.
I'll just check what my job is to. I don't know how I check. We can't. Are we going to ask? Well, you tell me how you want to do it.
The audience can put their hand up, so maybe if you could monitor
I
that.
don't think that's that easy to.
I can do it.
72 participants.
I mean, it's open to us really what we want to do in this session. I haven't got
attendees. Okay. Yes, I've got attendees on here.
Got a hand.
Sorry, so attendees who we can't see, if any of you would see my neighbor is the bottom one at all I come to. If you have a question to ask, could you put it into the chat and send it to us, and we'll try and answer them. Should we have about, Helen, how long do you want to allocate for this? We've only got till 9 o'clock, so 20 minutes to take questions.
Well, I mean, let's. I do want to allocate at the end, the largest amount of time to discussing this independent audit, because I think it is of concern to us given the history of them.
Okay.
But I think there's a few points we may want to deal with first, and it's also.
Okay. Alistair sent me a message that if you use the raise, Alistair, can you answer me? Alistair is our guru behind the scenes. Alistair, can you tell me if somebody uses a raise, hi guy, if somebody uses the raise hand button, can they then speak their question, or should they put their question into?
If they use the raise hand button and then you ask me to give them permission to speak, I can then allow them to use their microphone, and then we'll disable that once they finish speaking.
Well, let's do that. We're just going to take probably as many questions as we can get in. Can I ask anybody who in the audience who wants to speak to use the raised hand button? You'll come to the top of the list, and then we'll take you in turn. But we can ask you to ask your question or make your point in just 1 minute, to give a time for any of the panelists to add to it, and then we'll move on to the next one, because we really want to get a flavour of what the whole audience thinks. We don't want it dominated by 1 or 2 people. So
sorry, Steve. So sorry, could I just make a comment?
Yep, please.
If when people are using the chat, when you go to type in, you've got an option to have to all panelists or all attendees and panelists.
Yeah.
And if people use the second one, it means everybody who's attending will be able to see what they're typing as well.
Okay. Look,
so questions won't be hidden from the audience.
I think it's going to be quicker if we don't get people to speak from the audience, but people type into chat. So everybody who wants to speak, has a question or a point to make, please put it in the chat, and we'll take them in order as they come in. Okay. So sorry about that, Sean. I think you might have to type your question again.
Okay, but I think we need to discuss now what we want to, the outcomes we want from this meeting. So, I mean, given the questions that were asked by members, LLF members and panelists particularly, is there anything that you want to follow up in terms of a resolution or a statement or an additional question to GCP that I can put to them on Thursday? I mean, for instance, Grenville, are you happy with what was said about Hardwick there?
No. I mean, I gave Peter the opportunity to assure the residents, in a sense, not only of Hardwick, but Coton too, that their interests would be at the heart of the audit. And Peter singularly failed so to do. I think there are a number of things that Peter said which are conflict with each other. He recognises that people want to travel to Northern Cambridge, for example, but he also recognised that C2C won't go there. So it's a fat lot of use to them. I'm really concerned at Marcus's and I think Gabriel's point that they're not taking into account the impact either of COVID or East West Rail on their business plan. That's a nonsense. Both are sure to have an impact. And those, for me, are 3 major problems with what we have.
Okay.
But the question of who audits this has got to be audited. We have to be comfortable if we're going to have trust in this process of having an input into who is appointed as the auditor.
Okay.
And what their brief is.
It's interesting, Grenville.
I think, Steve, we need to be, we won't get anywhere if we're scattergun. We have to deal with
we're not being scattergun at all, Helen. We've had 2 questions in from people corroborating the point that I made, the point that Grenville's just made. Jerry Radford, independent auditors in the past have been anything but. What confidence do we have that this will be any better? will we have an input into or an ability to influence the auditor? And Gabriel has said, I'm very concerned at Peter's insistence that the scheme promoter is best placed to select and manage the independent auditor. This seems bound to lead to another whitewash. And I think we all agree with that.
Yeah, I mean,
So
this
the question is, what do we do?
This is our long history, because it's not just about who and getting the terms of reference right, it's where they get their information from, because of course, all along the process, we have complained about reports and about the information that goes in reports. There was the multi-criteria assessment formula, which the technical group thought was never impartial. And then these reports, these technical notes and what have you. I mean, I think there's a real issue with not only process, but with input of information here. It goes much deeper. I mean, do we want to talk about that first and then decide, if there are other questions?
Yes, I think we should, yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any points they'd like to raise on it? We've had a point about the without detailed elevations, for example, of the flyover over Bin Brook. How can the independent auditor do their work? Somebody's added a question about cycle path. Now John has said, if GCP appoint an auditor, then it's obvious they will choose somebody they prefer. The auditor needs to be appointed by an independent person or body. How can we make sure this happens? Is this something we should approach the MP about? Should we go to Anthony Brown and say, we need your help in this. This looks like we're going to go in exactly the same way we have done before. They're going to call it an independent auditor. The person will not be independent. They'll be paid by, with terms of reference written by, although they will write their own ones, of course, they'll then be agreed by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. We won't be involved in the process. And as somebody said, it will be a whitewash again. So is this something?
I mean, our proposed involvement, it seemed to me, was very, very weak. You will be asked to contribute along with, lots of other people. And I think we can only have confidence if we are integral to it. And I think your initial, I think in the question that you put, that we would be part of the steering committee is the only way really we can guarantee that.
I think one thing I'd like to say is, I think almost more important than our input, which is obviously very important, is to constrain the input of the officers, because we simply can't compete with them in terms of producing data and so on. We're not working on this every day. They have the bandwidth to talk to these auditors on a daily basis. So I think the most important thing is to control the interface between the officers and the auditor, to make it less cozy and less unconstrained. That they should be, for example, only allowed to talk to the auditor in an audited way, such that everything's documented. They're not allowed to have cozy chats around a coffee machine and so on. I think that seems to me almost more important than anything else.
I agree, and I think that's a great worry.
In terms of producing documents and so on.
Because we see from history, I mean, particularly with those Quick Win and Girton Northern Option Mott MacDonald reports that were done, that we did have really extensive input, or the technical group did.
We did, I mean,
part of the LLF, and yet still we had, the report, as I said, was the most disingenuous piece of work I've seen.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just matter who they get to input; it's where the pressure's coming from, and
So we need to make sure that they can't do that. And for example, they should definitely not be able to see a draft of the report before it's published. They should have no input whatsoever to the drafting process.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to say you can't communicate at all.
No, I think it just needs to be
but we need to be part of the process. We need to be in there with a right to see and a right to be copied into things and to know what's going on. Yeah.
No, they're clearly going to have extensive communication with the officers because they produce most of the reports.
See, I mean, when I've been, I was used to do this in central government a bit, working for Parliament in overseeing the UK aid programme and leading reviews of different aspects of the programme. And our contract was with Parliament. It was actually paid for by DFID, but that was just the money. They had no right to do other than pay the bills. And we were totally independent that way. This won't happen unless the auditor is somehow paid and contracted by somebody else, or is somehow protected. I think it might be good to get Anthony Brown's advice on, because he did this sort of thing in Greater London before on economic development, see what other models that we might take from other places, present our issue to him and see what he says.
Is it also somewhere, so, you know, we could, as Lena suggests, get the view of the combined authority on this?
Well, that as well, yeah.
I think I would have the greatest confidence in an external auditor if it had been agreed by the two MPs from South Cambs and from Cambridge City. And I should underline that Daniel Zeichner, as a former transport opposition spokes, has quite a view on some of these issues. And the transport authority, which is actually the mayor, right? If all three were to agree unanimously on an auditor, I would have a much greater confidence.
So the auditor should be appointed by those three people, not by GCP.
Well, or
with
we should have full sight of the terms of reference, which, you know, here it was said we appoint the person first and then the person develops the terms of reference. I mean, that's ridiculous in my view, and we need to point that out. That's not an independent review questioning the very foundation of the assumptions that were made. That's a validation.
Yes. Couple of in the chat. Yes, get the MP. Yes to the combined authority. A supervisory board with local resident LLF member. Can we include a clause in the contract along what I'd proposed in terms of whatever I proposed? Okay, fine.
Steve, can I just mention that Tom Bygot's got his hand up, and so is James Littlewood. And
thanks very much. Sorry, it's difficult for me to see it always. Yeah, James then, or Tom. James first, and then Tom.
Yeah, just to say, the combined authority, there is a danger there of politics coming into play in this. And I think it's important from the independence of the whole audit process that doesn't happen, and that we've talked about pressure from officers, but there's also the danger of pressure from politicians on the process. And I might fear the combined authority, whether that's the mayor or whoever becomes mayor, and also the combined authority itself is made up of politicians. So I feel more faith in the MPs having a kind of independent oversight rather than the combined authority.
Could I just check one question? And so I don't know what we are at the moment. Should we be having members of Greater Cambridge Partnership still with us, apart from Alistair, or should we be just an LLF group?
Well, they can watch it on YouTube, so I don't think it makes any difference.
It doesn't make any difference. Okay, fine. Well, welcome, Tom. I've just noticed you here. If you'd like to join in.
Now, please.
Sorry?
Tom, what's your view?
Yeah, so I'm going to raise a different topic. Is that okay now?
No, I want to.
No, we're still on the first one.
Can I come to my question once you finish this topic?
Yeah, sure, Tom. No problem. Yeah.
But I think we should try and wrap this up.
So have we agreed then that we should?
Can we have a look at your question, because I've got it up.
My question.
And then we can maybe adapt it with something.
I don't have it on screen, but I can read it out again. Shall I?
No, I've got it here. I've got it here.
And you've got this right to show screen share. I can as well, actually. Hang
on a minute. I've got 4. It's 4. Are we happy, by the way, with the answer on the EIA?
Personally, not happy with any of it, but there we are.
I think that's the least of our problems, probably.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Okay. So this is your question. So maybe we can work on something, and then we can get it sorted. So the LLF welcomes the decision of the GCP board to appoint an independent auditor. This is an opportunity for the board to build trust of the local community in the C2C process. Trust to be built in this way, the audit must demonstrably be independent. For this to be achieved, in our view, the audit must be managed by a steering committee, which is made up of people appointed by GCP and the LLF. The auditor should report to the steering committee, which will have the oversight of the audit process, including drafting and agreeing the terms of reference, selection of auditor, regular reviews of process, and commenting on reports and other outputs by the auditor. The audit should not be restricted to a narrow assessment of whether due process was followed, but will look at wider issues of how decisions were made.
I would just say the wording is joint with Chris Pratton. Actually, we both had inputs on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the trouble is
we need to get into the MP, don't we? We want the MP. You know, we want the MP's involvement.
If we now go with what they say, we would say that the independent auditor should be appointed by a committee of, are we going to say GCP together with the two Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire MPs and the whatever the mayors and the mayor of the combined authority? Is that, or are we saying that the MPs and the combined authority should do it, should appoint the independent person? That would be a better way to do it, wouldn't it?
So the independent auditor. Oops.
Be appointed.
How bad my typing is now.
Well, should be appointed by the. I mean, given the problems of you know, with apparent you know, issues with the mayor and GCP, we could just say by the two MPs. Or, but I mean, you know, somebody's point about the.
Ultimately, surely the auditor is going to report to the board. He won't report to Peter Blake. He will report to the GCP board, and therefore it's probably appropriate for the GCP board to appoint the
by the GCP board together with the two local MPs.
Yeah.
As ex officio members or something.
Can I just come in one thing, Steve?
Yep. Yeah, please. I can't.
Peter Blake's slide basically said their proposal was going to be, if I read it correctly, that the board appoint an independent auditor who will then go and find a transport expert to produce a report. And that transport expert should be independent and so on. So I think we need to bear that statement in mind in terms of what we're putting here, because the danger is if we fixate on the auditor, what will happen is the auditor will be agreed in all these different situations. Go and find a transport expert to produce a report, and that transport expert will then just spend their entire time talking to the officers to produce the report.
Yeah,
that's the danger we have to.
I mean, that was the point of the Arup one, wasn't it? I mean, when you looked at the methodology, it was Arup talking to GCP officers. And
the danger if we fixate on the auditor is we get the auditor we want, but they still go and produce a transport officer that a transport expert, sorry, that comes from wherever, and we go down exactly the same route again. So we really do have to concentrate on that relationship between the officers and the person producing the report. Otherwise, we end up with exactly the same things we've had in every other.
Okay, let's.
Steering committee is a good idea.
Can we come to that in a moment, Chris? Because I think here we still have something to do about the terms of reference for the internal auditor. I mean, we want sight of those, and we want to be able to contribute to them, don't we?
Yeah, but I think the trouble is that Peter's just made that much less relevant, because the
no, that's fair enough. But it's both stages. In other words, we need buy-in and we need consultation at that stage, and then the question is whether you can have an independent auditor and just say you go off and find your consultants and do the job, or whether you see if it's an internal auditor, we can't be involved in meeting. Well, it's difficult, isn't it? You know, if we don't want them to meet the guy, but he's got to talk to them, he's got to talk to us, but there's no structure at all to it. If he chooses to spend 90% of his time talking to the officials and less than 10% of the community, there's little we can do about it. How do we
I mean, my take from what Peter said was that actually our influence would be quite minor, and that's what we want to try to change if at all possible. And I think this idea of a steering committee is a good one. Because I think the problem.
Then you could say, okay, the audit should be managed day to day by a steering committee made up of, or just managed by a steering committee. Okay, we could put that paragraph in then, couldn't we? Just leave it.
Yeah.
But we take out.
I think we want early sight, don't we? But maybe as part of the steering committee.
Well, we have oversight of the audit process. I think we then delete including drafting and agreeing terms of reference and selection of the auditor, because that's done above. With selection, we haven't done yet. But we do we should have oversight of the audit process and undertake regular reviews of progress and commenting on reports and other outputs by the auditor. So all of that stuff. But then we do need to It's going to say it's going to be appointed by the GCP board with 2 local MPs as officio members. Okay.
Can I come in on that point there? Because I think there are a couple of us who are saying that in the chat that the combined authority is the transport authority. So surely the combined authority should be involved. In fact, I would assume that we'd have a stronger hand if we are working together with the transport authority.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree. Well, I think we all agree. We slipped that one, yeah. With the combined authority and 2 local MPs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know whether the phrase ex officio members is correct or not. I said it earlier.
Yeah.
And sorry to be pedantic, but do we want to specify who the local MPs are, as in South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge?
I think we do, yeah. 2.
MPs.
Well, just the 2 with the MPs for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire.
Yeah.
And Cambridge City, whatever it's called.
Cambridge.
What is the constituency? Is it Cambridge City?
Okay.
Cambridge City.
Yeah.
And I think then if we're looking at if the audit is not restricted to a narrow assessment of whether due process was followed, but we'll look at wider issues of how decisions were made. Well, I guess that scope needs to be established and overseen. It's not just about setting the scope, that's important, but it's also about, you know, the process that happens after that. So we don't just drift into what happened before, you know, officers sitting on the shoulder of the consultant and getting all the input. So are we avoiding that with this, or are we managing that with this now?
Siobhan has written in the chat, and she's got a point. How do you prove these auditors are not just time-killing process? It's just part of the GCP trying to waste time before they say, "Oh well, we've got to put something forward now." So we're doing such.
Yes, I completely believe this is another time-killing and delay process.
Yeah.
I assumed it was a delay process till after the election.
And we can only make it meaningful if we have input. So that's what we've really got to.
Yes.
Maybe we have to be clear that if we don't have input and, you know, part of a steering committee, then it's going to be very difficult for us to believe that it's credible.
I don't think we need to put that in the resolution, but we need to highlight that for us, it's not an independent review if we have no sight, no impact, no influence on the process, right? So I think we need to make that very, very clear.
Maybe
they will. I doubt they will agree on the steering committee, but equally, we need to take it out. We need to highlight that if this review is not independent, that will come out as the influence that officers have had on all the other technical reports will come out at the inquiry stage, and we should highlight that.
Does everybody agree? Do we want to put it in this resolution?
I'm not sure that we don't stand our ground for the steering committee. We can refuse to have it, but then, you know, we can go back saying, you know, you have to involve, the local community has to be involved for there to be trust, and independence at some stage. You know, I think, I mean, I agree they probably won't agree it, but
for me, trust is an inextricable part of this.
Yeah,
we need to have a key role in it. If we don't, then the residents will never trust it, they'll never accept it, and we'll just go on and on in the same way that we've done for the last 5 years. We need to be at the heart of this, representing our residents. That's what they expect us to do.
The chairman of the Cambourne Town Council, Councillor O'Dwyer, has put it in.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Okay, are we happy with this resolution now, or is there anything anybody wants to add to that then?
James,
I think we
James
should
has got
be-
his hand up, Helen.
Sorry?
James has got his hand up.
Yeah, I can't see that because I've got this on my screen.
Don't worry.
Yeah, just to say, in terms of the GCP board, when they meet, one assumes that they're the first question is, do they agree to an independent panel, which we hope that they will, and we need to support. But I don't think they're going to have I don't imagine they're going to have an in-depth discussion about the sort of the nuts and bolts of that. And maybe all we need to be asking for at this stage to get them to agree to is that they agree that, the LLF will be involved in some way in that process. And obviously we can then have the conversations outside of that about how that happens. I mean, I think we're doing that in a little bit, but in this statement, but I think that's, we just want to get them to agree that when they meet, Helen. I think that's the thing. If they agree to carry out an independent audit and then they agree that the LLF should have an involvement in some way, we can potentially thrash out the detail of that with them later.
Yeah, I know that, but I think we have to put down a very serious marker here that we won't accept, lots of input, but that we're not in any way steering it, which is what's happened before. Unfortunately, there's a lot of us been doing this, for 5 years, and we've seen what's happened in previous ones and how it can look hunky-dory, and also the report at the end look convincing, but actually what's happened in between and what the report doesn't say, and the information that's been put into the report is not acceptable. And, and I think we've got to learn by our mistakes, and we've clearly made mistakes, or we haven't managed to influence an impartial process to date.
That's what I've got to say again. I think we've got to constrain the interaction between the officers and this process at this point. We really do.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. I think
some requests in now, it's going to go exactly the same route as before.
The issue we've had in the past is not lack of apparent input. It's the fact that our input has been of no consequence because the process has been run by GCP, by the officers.
Exactly.
And that's the key. Not so much that we are involved, but that they are not.
Exactly.
As long as they are in charge of selection and driving and briefing and management and drafting and oversight, then it will not be independent. And I think that's probably the number one point.
I totally agree. And that's the key point we have to get in. And we have to say that unless such and such is done, it's not independent.
And not...
Maybe we put a final underneath the last bullet, or up there, we just say, unless the task force representing local community opinion is included in this process, it will not be regarded as independent, and it will not have the trust of the community.
No, I think that's the wrong way round, and I think it's what David was saying.
What about this then that I've just put into the and not dominated by GCP?
I think you've got to go further than that. I think you've got to say all interaction between GCP officers and the auditor has to be documented. They're not allowed to have any conversations with them that are not documented.
They're not going to do that.
They're not going to do that. No.
No, but we need to insist on transparency of the review process.
That's different.
At all stages.
Must be independent, transparent, and not dominated by GCP officers. How about that?
Yes.
That's going to get nowhere. You can't, a phrase like "not dominated." They're going to say, "Of course, we're not going to dominate."
I think we need to say positively, and the community, the local LLF, representing the local community, must be involved in the process. Now, that's what we're asking for, isn't it?
No, it's not. I don't think that's going to work. I honestly don't think that's going to work.
That doesn't work per se unless...
Well, it won't work, but it's better than not being there at all.
I think we have to be part of an overseeing committee, which is what we're asking here, that we can look at, at any point, we can look at what... So maybe a selected 2 or 3 might be on this steering committee, and we can... we get monthly reports on, what information the consultant has had and what conversations they've had. Just a report.
That consultant's still going to constantly be ringing up the officers and saying, "What did you mean in this report? What did you mean here? What did you mean there?" And before you know it, they're buddies.
Ellen, what about if you swapped controlled for dominated? So it's not controlled by GCP officers.
That's a very good point, Granville.
Could we be in the first bullet point instead of saying the auditor should be appointed by, because that's not absolutely necessary. I think I agree with Chris. What's absolutely necessary is that the independent auditor should not be selected, managed, or otherwise directed by the GCP's transport officers. I think that's the problem.
I kind of liked Lena's proposal in the chat.
What was that? Sorry, I can't see the chat.
All interaction between the GCP and the auditors should be documented. Then they've got to audit. I mean, I honestly can't see that happening, because the auditor and the auditor's consultant are going to be doing this all the time. They're going to be also talking to us and talking to other stakeholders. If they have to document every single conversation they have.
But if they refuse this request, that means that if there's any conversation with them about the reporting process that we find out about afterwards, it completely invalidates this report, and we have an angle to invalidate the report. So I think we should request it even if they won't do it. Because even if they don't say yes to it, it means they're going to be more careful in their interactions that they have, because they're going to realize that if it can be demonstrated that they had any of this undue influence, we've already got a reason to claim to show that the report is not then independent. I think we should ask for it anyway.
How many members are there on the GCP board? Who's on it at the moment?
Don't remember offhand.
It's 3 leaders or 3 high representatives of the councils, plus the university, plus a business representative, plus now the mayor. So we could even take the combined authority out of it, because he is a part of the GCP board now.
Yeah, but I don't think he has a vote, Marcus.
No, he doesn't have a vote. And we need to say this independent reviewer needs to be appointed unanimously by the voting and non-voting members of the GCP board.
Okay. We got the combine authority there, though, haven't we, already then?
Yeah, yeah.
And agreed by the MPs. And agreed by the MPs?
Yeah.
Yeah, small s. That was good. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that does it. So if we take out the second bullet, and these other ones remain, but if they, we may have to fight over them later. But you've got up here in the first paragraph, we've got independent, transparent, not controlled. We've got the auditor being appointed in this way. If those were agreeable, we'd be a long way towards getting things done properly.
Okay. All right. Can we agree that one then?
You've got straight and odd together in the second paragraph, Helen. Non-voting members of the GCP board.
And agreed by and agreed to by. Yeah,
that's it.
And agreed to by. Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to vote on that or ask for?
I think we should ask for that.
Should we vote on it now? So the LLF is voting.
Let's
I support that.
Okay. All in favour?
Agreed.
How many members we've got?
Agreed.
Who can? I can't vote. Who can count?
Well, we can't. I can't get everybody on the screen easily. I can if I do that, I suppose. Can we have let's put the question another way. Any GCP member who doesn't support this motion,
any LLF member,
sorry, Freudian slip. I've only just learned to say GCP tonight instead of City Deal. Anyway, okay. Does anybody on this go on, Helen? You're the chair. Sorry.
Okay, does anybody on the LLF not support this? Because I think it's pretty difficult for us to see how many people are here and we're running out of time.
So it is unanimously supported then by the
LLF and don't agree.
Okay, that's good. So that's done. And that's a very good negotiating start, isn't it?
It is. Okay.
Okay.
So then, Tom, what did you want to raise? I saw a very interesting thing that you might, it might be relevant to what you're saying from Matthew Brown on the chat there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I wanted to mention was one thing we talked about today was East West Rail, and the fact that EWR may make an announcement next year as to the location of the station in Cambourne. So we don't actually know what the destination of this is going to be in Cambourne. And then the other side, so one of the things that was said today was that
Sorry, Tom, where was this said today?
So it was in discussion in the first hour.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah.
Yeah, so to Ruth's question.
Okay.
Another thing that was said was that the C2C route would work hand in glove with CAM. And on one of the slides, it said there were no current technical and design capability issues.
Yeah.
So I'm having a read of the Combined Authorities press release of the 13th of November, in which they say that they're actually going through a tendering process at the moment, and that the three top scoring tenderers will be awarded contracts to develop conceptual designs in full, and that these will be delivered in March 2021. It talks about a design challenge. The scope of the challenge includes what type and size of proposed autonomous metro vehicles there are, and what infrastructure the vehicle would run on. So there is no specification for the metro, and there can't be a specification until that process is complete, because we don't know what sort of track it's going to have even. So you can't design a route if you don't know those things. So we don't know where it's going, and we don't know how the route is supposed to be built. And so for that reason, I'd like us to see no decision made to go forward until we hear those two things: a specification on the Cam Metro and the location of the East West Rail Station.
Yeah, I mean, on East West Rail.
Maybe we can then doctor the resolution we made last time, which I can put up while we're talking.
Yeah, can I just talk on East West Rail? Sorry, Ruth, I'll just come in, and then I'm in quite a lot of discussion with them from the Bourne Parish Council side and the coalition. They are basically going to put forward at least two options for consultation. We're told early in the new year, we don't know exactly when, and they've come under a lot of pressure to make sure, and they have actually said publicly in meetings that one of the options will be a Cambourne North Station. I don't believe them until I see it, but there's enormous pressure in Cambourne, in Bourne, in all the surrounding villages for it to be north of Cambourne. It makes so much more sense in all cases. But it is unlikely, I think, until later on in 2021 that there'll be an answer on which of these is preferred, the South Station or the North Station. Sorry, Ruth.
Can I just add to that the comment that Joe O'Dwyer has put in the chat? And he says, given the devastation of EWR station south of Cambourne will cause Cambourne and the impact on the quality of life of its residents, will the LLF support Cambourne's call for a station north of Cambourne?
A very good question.
So Cambourne Town Council are behind the north as well.
Yeah,
they are very much, yeah.
That was my point. And at the Cambourne Town Council earlier this month, I quickly messaged Anthony Brown, and he said that he supports Cambourne Town Council pushing for a station to the north. And he also said that East West Rail, I'm trying to find the message he sent me, East West Rail have been making very positive noises about the station being to the north.
I mean, to be fair to Anthony, he's been saying this for 6 months now, nearly.
Yeah. So if the LLF could find its way to supporting Cambourne Town Council and pushing for the station to the north on the A428, that would be greatly appreciated, and put additional pressure on it. And I think then it would help somewhat with the C2C routing.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the LLF has always wanted the C2C to sit on existing infrastructure, so it could help that if it were going north.
Can I just intervene there? One thing, people often use the phrase northern route, and of course we're talking in this context about a station to the north of Cambourne, but of course people are tying that through to a northern route at the eastern end. So Helen, you mentioned about Matthew Brown's comment in the chat. Now, of course, I very much support the American cemetery in not having a route that goes immediately past the cemetery.
I think,
and as district council for Madingley, I have to say that as well.
Yeah, I think that is debatable. I mean, it could equally well go from the south and come up and wrap round to the north of the A428 to the east of Hardwick. You know, there are plenty of, in fact, there's a route there that would come out of the south and affect almost no community at all if it's designed properly all the way to Cambourne. So, I mean, there is pressure from some people say they wanted to go north, other people wanted to go south. All, you know, from talking now from Bourne Parish Council's point of view, supporting Cambourne is we want it to go north.
Well,
we wanted to go south, we don't care which way it goes, rather, but we want the station to be north. That's the main
I'm very happy for us to say that it should go north of the A428 to the west of Madingley Mulch. But obviously, as district councillor for Madingley, I can't support any route further to the north or anything that goes next to the cemetery.
No, and that's understandable.
Yeah, I think the intention is it would.
That.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
So we can. Well, the point I was making, sorry to dominate, but was that we can say we support Cambridge North without making a decision on whether we're supporting it for a northern route or a southern route. We're just supporting the fact that the station for East West Rail should be north of Cambourne. And I think for Cambourne, it just makes absolute sense. The whole of the community and Bourne Airfield and West Cambourne would then focus in using existing roads towards to a communications hub. That's where, if the bus C2C ever happened, it should terminate. It just makes sense. Yeah. So.
I mean, what we do is, you know, as Ruth was pointing out earlier, we want a station that gives us an integrated transport system and that, you know, that speaks to, you know, the buses that are going and whatever C2C becomes. So if we believe that Cambourne North does that better, then I think that's in our scope. Do we want to vote on that? Anybody got any more comments?
Do we need to take a position on this? Because I'm not sure I'm fully informed. Also, how it relates to the Bourne Airfield plans and all those kind of things. What I don't want is us voting for the train station to the north, and then GCP coming back to us saying, "Oh, then we need a bus to the south." Because I think, you know, the two transport options need to go hand in hand. And, you know, having seen the officers weasel out of the question about the train and saying they basically haven't considered it, I think we need to restate our question from June, which said, have you really considered the impact of a train project that all three constituting councils have argued for to go to the north, to go to Cambourne, right? This is not our pressing the railway. This is the three constituting councils pushing for it.
Yeah, okay. I think Marcus is probably right that we probably can't do this in the LLF unless we circulate papers and stuff ahead of time and do it properly.
I agree with that. I think we've got to do that next time.
Yeah. In the meantime, we will convene a meeting of the Coalition of Parish Councils, invite Cambourne to join too, and we'll have a discussion about it and possibly a vote on that sometime. Probably just after Christmas, after New Year.
I mean, I think we are saying the same thing as we said in June, though, aren't we? You know, with the resolution of 2nd of June, that, you know, it's not necessarily the right thing. The decision shouldn't be made now, and you know, we support high quality bus priority measures and improve services in the meantime, because that whole argument that they followed process, it doesn't matter what's coming. It's just, I mean, they don't have to do it that way. They can take a pause, decide there's these big decisions coming, and therefore we won't make we won't press ahead with millions of more pounds on this until we know that. So let's do the high quality bus measures for now. So I think, I'm not sure that our position has changed since June on this.
Could we restate our resolution from June, or to reiterate it?
So, I mean, it's here. The only thing I've changed on it is here. because in June we supported the development of interim, and I think, as far as I'm aware, they've been developed. These.
Yes, they're running now.
Yes, there are 2 buses that go. Well, they go to other villages as well, but basically they go from Cambourne to the north, to the Cambridge North. So basically the science park, and also south down the motorway to Addenbrooke's.
Which companies are those, Ruth?
Stagecoach.
They are Stagecoach, are they?
Stagecoach, yeah.
905 and 906.
Well, those are new developments since they did their business plan.
Yes.
The mayor put them in place. I think we had a meeting at the start of this year, and they were implemented a few months ago. So it was really quick. It was really good.
Are they proving popular?
Yes.
Well, COVID, but yes.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Okay, so let's. Should we just take that forward, because it was?
Yeah.
I think that.
So we'll look at that in a future one. There's a comment here from John Marriott. 1 station north of Cambourne and 1 or 2 in Cambridge is not going to be of use to most people. So I think we need to take account of all of those sorts of views when we discuss it next time.
I mean, and I think we should discuss it next time, because I'm very keen that that we support what's needed in Cambourne. It's just many people.
My view is that if we get fast and reliable transport, so the East-West Rail and the metro, and we have a travel hub to the north of Cambourne on the A428, in my personal view, now I don't know all the differences and everything, but I think that would probably take most of the people on it and alleviate the congestion. So then why do we need an off-road bus? But that's my personal opinion.
Okay.
And then we sort out all the issues in one go.
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay, can we? I'm keen to draw attention to the American Cemetery supervisor, which is Superintendent Matthew Brown, who has put a question in the chat. His question is about cultural heritage preservation, remembering that any off-road option will result in new construction in the Cambridge Greenbelt. Will GCP agree to conduct an audit of the cultural heritage landscape surrounding Madingley Hill? And I think that's one step above an EIA, to have, to talk about, why that cemetery is there and what it means, what's its significance, and what is its setting, what constitutes its setting. And it isn't just, will a busway alignment there or there, what trees will it destroy, and, what's the value of the green belt there? I think it's more significant than that. So I think that's something that we could support.
And I'm happy to move that on Matthew's behalf.
I think that's absolutely crucial. We must respect that totally.
So can we? Can we vote on the? Can anybody raise their hand that doesn't agree with that?
Well, speak if you don't agree, because we might not see you all.
Sorry, it's James from Cambridge Fashion Feature. I was slightly distracted there. Were we saying we were going to add something about the American Cemetery in there? Is that what
the idea was? It should be an overall cultural heritage assessment, taking account of the cultural importance of the American Cemetery and Madingley Hill, something higher than an EIA. Yeah?
So Matthew Brown, who's superintendent of the cemetery, has put that in the chat, and I think that's something that we should consider supporting.
Well, the only thing that I would say is that we're obviously as a group have argued for a long time for an inbound only bus lane, and whilst that wouldn't involve cutting down any trees, it would clearly also potentially have an impact on the setting. And I'd just be concerned there that we would be setting ourselves up to fail, shooting ourselves in the foot there potentially.
Interesting.
So I would not be keen on that going in. I mean, the EIA process is pretty thorough. What's not clear to me is that the EIA process usually has a scoping exercise that takes place beforehand, in which case you say what should be included in the EIA. And I think maybe that's the point, that we need to look at what they're proposing to scope in and scope out, and feed directly into that at this stage. So maybe the question is like, when's the scoping process going to take place? Or have they done it already and not told us?
Yeah. I think James made some extremely sound point there.
But I think it's worth still doing an assessment of all those issues, because I mean that implies that we're favouring one solution over another. Mm-hmm. I think that Matthew's point really is that we need to make sure that the issue of cultural heritage and the setting of the cemetery is taken into account in any decision that is made, and that is absolutely something that we as representatives of the local community should be making sure happens.
Yeah, I know, I completely agree with you. I think so we can say as part of the EIA, which we understand to be after the independent audit, we want to make sure,
Helen, I actually think we need to state that. We need to actually tell the board that we think an EIA before the independent review is completely useless, because what if there are fundamental changes that they have to make? Then do we do another EIA?
I think it's predetermined actually, but let's go on to that. Just in the final couple of minutes, I think just dealing with Tom's point here, I think we should be saying that as part of the EIA, can the will GCP ensure that an audit of the cultural heritage landscape is included, the cultural heritage as well as the environmental heritage.
Well, we can wrap that into a single point, can't we? Can we say that with regard to an EIA, we can't see any value in starting that prior to the outcome of the audit, because any work done will be useless, So we can say, and then secondly, we would call on the GCP, exactly as Matthew says, to include in its EIA a proper cultural and heritage assessment with particular focus on the American cemetery, because I don't think that an on-road scheme would have a detrimental effect to the same degree as the creation of a new road just on the other side of the 1303. The 1303 is already there. I can't do anything about that. What you can do is you can slow the traffic down. You can stop it being a 50-mile-an-hour zone. You can make it down to a 40, and you can slightly widen the road to allow. You don't even have to do very much to allow a bus lane.
Okay.
I'm still uncomfortable with picking one thing out of an EIA, which is a massive process. And I think the issue is really around the scoping for the EIA and about having a say on the scoping. And, that gives us an opportunity to raise lots of things, including that. It just feels like plucked out of the area. I think the question should be around what's the EIA scoping process, and can you assure us that we will have an opportunity to input into that? And that gives us that opportunity to raise that issue, plus other issues we might want to raise.
Helen, do we still have a technical committee? I mean, I haven't been asked to go to a meeting for about a year.
Well, we haven't had anything to consider.
But we could ask for it to be resuscitated, so that there's a
have a technical group to scope the EIA, and then we can,
and the other activities, just be interact with the GCP and its staff on all aspects of the work going forward, and we should get James or somebody with a strong environmental bent to join.
Steve and Helen, I think Rod Cantrell has dropped out, so if we want a replacement with some environmental knowledge and
we do.
Knowledge of impact assessments, then I could volunteer.
Okay, so is that what we're asking for? So we're suggesting that we set up another technical group to start talking to GCP, or do we talk to GCP?
We re-establish or not. We haven't ceased to exist. It's just we haven't met.
And so that we then establish the scope, and within that scope, we will be looking at the issues to do with the cultural heritage landscape surrounding Madingley Hill.
Helen, just to clarify, this is what I'm talking about here is a technical sort of process set out by Department for Transport. So in terms of doing the EIA, the way that this would work is that the GCP would apply to the Department for Transport to carry out an environmental impact assessment. And they do that by submitting a scoping report. And what they say to the Department for Transport in that is that we will assess the following things when carrying out this scoping. And it actually goes straight to Department for Transport. The local planning authority is consulted on it because they're a statutory stakeholder, but we wouldn't be. And that, you know, we can contact the Department for Transport directly, but we don't have any status in that. So if the GCP board, you know, on Thursday decide to say we'll go ahead with the EIA, then they will start that process. So I think the clear thing that we want to be saying to them is, you know, we want the LLF wants to be able to feed into that scoping in order to say what it, you know, there is, so that what the GCP put to the Department for Transport includes our views at that stage. Because if the GCP just does it, at that point we have absolutely zero say whatsoever. We can lobby the Department for Transport, but whether they listen to us or not, I don't know. We're not statutory consultees, only the local planning authority is.
And well, it's not just about scoping though, is it? That actually, wouldn't we then want regular input?
Like, yeah, it's not quite how it works. So basically, it's a formal process, and so the scoping sets out to the GCP what they would need to cover in the environmental impact assessment. So, you know, this includes, for example, where they will look at views. So, which views will they consider as part of it? And if it's not in there, then they don't technically have to sort of do it. When they, you know, they'll produce their, you know, assessment based on what's in the scoping. So getting the stuff in the scoping right to start with is quite important.
Okay. So that's something we want to request.
Yeah. So I think if they decide to approve the EIA, then we want the LLF should have a, you know, whether it's a technical group or a discussion to agree with the GCP what goes into the EIA scoping, and at that point we can argue for the, you know, Madingley Hill Cemetery or you know the dozens of other things we'll want them to consider.
What do you think about that, Tom? We need to wrap up shortly.
Yeah. Sorry,
Could you think about that, Tom?
You just repeat the question?
That we will consider and we'll ask for an audit of the cultural heritage landscape as part of the scoping.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to do something very specific about that cultural heritage point. So, so I really do believe that we do need to make a resolution about that today, and you know, whether we ask for it specifically to be included in the EIA or some other mechanism, I do feel that we need to make that point.
What do other people feel about this?
I'm not convinced by that. I think James has probably got the most effective route in set out, and I think we ought to go with that. Refer it to the technical group, let them start to work on it, and then see what comes out of that.
Well, the problem is that there's absolutely no guarantee that anybody is going to listen to anything we say. So it means we need to say things very loudly and very clearly.
I agree.
So it's a matter of public record, what was ignored and what wasn't.
Yeah, that's very true. But what we found we did with the technical group before was we could ask on one-on-ones with officers for the actual data and go through it. So we understood a lot of the tricks they played and increasing the number of variables that they measured to make one scheme more important than another, the way in which they scored particular environmental impacts. So I think getting in close with them is a good strategy. And it should be a good strategy for them too, because they hear what our concerns are. I mean, it should result in.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think definitely restart the technical group, definitely have close discussions with officers about those technical points. But I think as a matter of public advocacy, you know, one of our jobs is to make sure that the public and institutions like the American Cemetery are listened to. And we need to make that point very loudly and very clearly, so that, you know, if there are other levels of government who are watching this process, that, you know, it's very clear that certain things that ought to have been considered, like the cultural heritage, like the American Cemetery, that have been ignored, that people can flag up that it has been asked for. Because otherwise, if you try to put everything in a sort of an internal backdoor route into discussions with officers, then it's very clear, it's very easy for that, all that advocacy to be lost and brushed aside. But unless there is some public record that it's been called for, then how do people know that we've been ignored?
Right.
Well, I would just say under the EIA process, they will definitely consider the American cemetery because of its status. So, I mean, that's probably going to be the top thing on their list, along with the SSI along the hill at the top. So it's certainly not going to be ignored in the EIA. I would be surprised, if, like I say, if it's not the top of one of the top things. So I'm not sure what we're asking for specifically that wouldn't be already picked up by that.
Well, I think the subtlety here, though, James, is that we're asking to conduct an audit of the whole cultural heritage landscape surrounding Madingley Hill. So hitherto, that's only been assumed to be north, and I think what's happening here is an assessment that, you know, the whole landscape is of significance with regard to the cemetery. So I'm inclined to think it's a thing that's, you know, that's you know, that's very good to happen, you know, that we should be supporting. But that's just my view. I mean, we don't have to say anything at this point. We can just say that we want to be involved in the scope. I'm not sure we can agree tonight, but I mean, I'm certainly agreeing wholeheartedly with Matthew Brown here.
Well, you know,
I'd involvement in the scope, because I think that's all we're going to agree to today. And
maybe we should ask for the technical committee to be re-established. We will include an environmentalist, and we should then be involved in the scope of the EIA. That's one of those things. Put it all together.
I agree with that.
And Tom can be part of that technical group.
Yeah, but I don't see why we can't ask for those three things and mention the cultural heritage as a fourth thing. I don't see any downside.
Yeah, okay, absolutely.
Yeah,
okay.
I think if you want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm making a lot of noise.
The four things are. My brain's frazzled now, Tom.
So James, do you want to read those out while Helen writes them down?
Well, I think it was, we want to re-establish the technical group. We want to input into the EIA scoping exercise. And you know, and that should include the Madingley Cemetery. And I think the first one was that we didn't agree that the EIA should start until they've actually done the independent audit. So I think just so where my laptop's about to crash. So if I leave, that's not because it's just because I've run out of power.
Mm. And you know, and okay, and then we do we or do we not want to include an audit of the entire cultural landscape, north and south of Madingley Hill?
Well, I think that's what we say rather than just the cemetery. I think
Lena's just put in the chat. Simply emphasise that there should be a culture and heritage review of the whole area.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, we don't need to say more than that. It's too specific. The EIA should include that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I think that's all, folks, unless anybody else wants anything else. But I quite want my dinner.
Are we going to vote on that as a resolution?
Anybody objecting to that?
Or abstaining?
Or abstaining? No. And I think we need to come back to the North Cambourne issue. You know, certainly as a priority in the next meeting. But we need.
Can I just ask one question? Can we only meet as an LLF when GCP calls the meeting?
I mean, no, I think we can suggest one. So, I mean, we could put those two items on a next agenda, couldn't we? And then
we want to have an LLF on Cambridge North Station and the integration of, you know, transport services for Cambourne and surrounding area.
I think that would be a good idea, yes.
And how we want an EIA to look. In terms of
we put that on the agenda too for that, yeah. And should we do that in January? Come, you know, put the pressure on them now. None of them giving us 4.5 days notice.
So then we can put, so it's for Cambourne North, it's for integrated transport, and it's for scoping the EIA.
And can we reiterate what our June declaration was? Can we vote on that again?
Do you want to see it again, or do you want to just reiterate it? Do you want to see it again?
No. Well, I was just going to say, if we could vote to reaffirm what we said in June.
Yeah.
Because it's still completely relevant.
Yes,
no, agree. Anybody got a problem? Anybody against or abstaining?
No.
Right, good. I think we're done, aren't we? Is everybody happy?
Yeah, well done, everyone.
Yeah, well done, everyone. Yep.
Thanks, Helen. Great job once again.
Right.
Helen, well done, thanks. And Steve, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're all a good team, aren't we? So it's great.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I'm now off to a parish council meeting.
Well, look at you.
Bye.
Bye.